One of OrgMode's most useful features is its publishing system, which allows you to turn org files into many other formats. In this video, I'll show you how to use it to generate a simple but nice looking website using OrgMode's HTML publishing capabilities. Stick around to learn more. What's up, everybody? Welcome to System Crafters. I'm David Wilson, and if you enjoyed today's video, please click the like button below and subscribe if you haven't already. Both of those things help a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And if you really enjoy the content that I make on this channel, please check out the link below to support, find ways that you can support the channel. That would help me out a lot. I really appreciate it. So to get started, we're going to need a place to put all the code that we're going to use to generate the website that we're working on today, along with the .org files that will provide the site's content. So I'm going to have a folder that I'll show you in a second called My Org Site that has a subfolder called Content. And let me just pull that out really quickly. So we're looking at this in Dired. We're looking at the My Org Site folder here. And if you jump into the Content folder, we have a single index.org file that will serve as the root of our website. And whenever we actually generate the site, this will turn into index.html. And if we look at this, this is basically just the landing page for our simple example website. It just has some basic text here with a little bit of formatting and a few links that we can check whenever we actually finally generate this website. So we're just going to start with a very, very basic content for this. And then as we go along in this series, we'll add some more stuff to it to make it a little bit more fleshed out. So don't actually place any code blocks in the org files yet. As you follow along with this video, I'll show you exactly how to deal with that a little bit later in the video so that we can find a way to manage that a little bit more effectively. The nice thing about what we're going to do today is actually most of the stuff in this episode can be done only with the built-in functionality of Emacs and org mode. If you have like at least Emacs version 24.5 or higher, which is pretty easy if you're on a more recent distribution of Linux. And also whatever org mode package version comes in box with that Emacs that you already have. So you don't need to install any crazy dependencies, just what is already in the box should do. All right, so to have a consistent way to generate our website, what we're gonna wanna do is create a build script in Emacs Lisp that can generate the HTML files for all of our org documents by running a single shell command. So we're gonna start with this build site.el file, and I'm gonna copy this over to this new file, and I'll tell you exactly what it does after we get it created. So I'm gonna open up my org site folder. I'll create a build site.el file, and I'll paste in the content. And of course, it doesn't pick up the right thing. So let me just go back and pull this again. All right, so now what we're doing here is we're gonna require the OX publish feature of Emacs. It's basically a built-in functionality of Emacs that serves as the publishing system for org mode. And when I say publish, I don't actually mean like submitting the files to a website to have them go live. This actually just means generating the actual output files for a set of org mode documents. So we require the publishing system, and then we just write a message to say that the build is complete, and that's enough just to get our script started. Now the next thing is to create a shell script that can actually launch this Emacs Lisp script. This isn't 100% necessary, but I recommend doing it so that you don't have to remember the way to invoke Emacs correctly to do this every time you want to generate your site. So we're going to create a script called build.sh. I'm going to paste in this little snippet of code here. And basically what this does is it runs Emacs with the -- script parameter and pass in the build site.el file that we just created. Now it uses this -Q parameter to make sure that Emacs does not load your personal Emacs configuration whenever it tries to run this script. And the reason why we do that is to make sure that things in our personal configuration don't leak into this script and cause it to depend on things in our config. Because when we try to use this script to publish our website by running it through automation systems, etc., we want to make sure that this script can run completely standalone with no other dependencies other than what's inside of this script, or at least what can be installed from inside of this script. So it's very important to use the -Q parameter here. And this is sort of why we create this bash script, just to automate this whole process. So now what we can do is go to a shell and then use chmod, change mode, I guess it is, +x build.sh. And what this is going to do is make this script executable. And then we can run the script by using build.sh. And now what it's going to do is going to launch Emacs with this build site.el that we created, and it has this build complete message that comes at the very end. So we can see that that did actually work. And if you're on Windows, you can create a build.cmd file, which operates just the same way. It just needs to invoke Emacs with the same parameters, and everything should just work. So now that we've got our basic script set up, we can set up an org publishing configuration that will help us generate our website. So we've got another little snippet that we're going to add to our buildsite.el file. I'm just going to copy this over, and then we can see what it does. I'll just push it right here. And what we're doing is setting the value of the org publish project A-list variable. And this is actually a list of configurations for different publishing projects. So the reason why you see two list function calls here is because the top level list is actually the list of all project configurations, and each second level list is actually the configuration for one project. And in this case, we have a project called my org site. This string can be whatever you want it to be. It just needs to be a unique string in this list of org publish project A list, because each one basically identifies each project. So everything that comes after that is a set of key value pairs. You have a keyword and then some value that configures this project. And in this case, we have the base directory for the content, which is our content folder. This is the place where all of our org files live. And then we have the publishing directory, which is the output folder, which doesn't exist yet, but it will get created when we run this, which is the public folder in this case. And then the publishing function, which is org HTML publish to HTML. And this is the function that you can use to produce an HTML website out of a set of org files. Now, there's a bunch of other publishing functions that come with Emacs for things like publishing to LaTeX or maybe to PDF files, etc. And in this case, we're not going to use those. We're just going to use the HTML function. However, you can go check out those other ones as well and use the same publishing system to publish to those formats too. And lastly, we're going to call this, one other thing I forgot to mention, recursive T. This actually tells org mode that whenever you look at the content folder, also look at all subfolders under that to generate org files that exist in all of the subfolders. So just keep that in mind as well. So at the end, we're going to call this org publish all function. And this basically says for all of the projects that are configured in this org publish project A list, you want to run the publishing system on all of them. And the T parameter actually basically tells it don't use any cached files, just regenerate everything from scratch. Typically, I think this is a good idea because anytime you change configuration, you're going to want to regenerate all your files from scratch. So since we're automating this in the script, let's just always tell it to regenerate everything. It doesn't take that long, especially if you don't have any files to generate. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. All right, let's go back to our presentation here. One last thing I'll say about that is that you should definitely use describe variable. If you've never used describe variable before, you can use Alt-X and then describe variable. And use it on the org publish project A list variable. There's a lot more documentation inside of that you can use to learn how you can configure various project settings, which can be pretty useful. So let's see, what else we have here? So let's actually try to generate the output of our site by running build.sh. So right now, if we were to go into the shell and take a look at the my org site folder, there's no publish or public folder yet. But if we run build.sh again, now what's going to happen is it will run the org publishing system for the configuration that we set up, and we can see that it's publishing the file index.org using org HTML publish to HTML. And then once that finally completes, we will see that there is a public folder that is now visible. And then inside of the public folder, there's an index.html file. So if we want to go check that out, we can open up, let's see, we can open up the public folder and then open up index.html, and we can see there's quite a lot of HTML output here, including some style sheet information, some metadata about the file that we generated. Also, there's this block that has some JavaScript code somewhere. I mean, it's quite a large file in the end. For the small file that we had, it's about 260 lines. So it was pretty easy, right? That there didn't really take much code to actually get to this point where we generated the output of an org file to HTML. So now let's take a look at how we can preview this site so we can actually see what it looks like. So obviously you could open this file in Firefox, or I don't know what's asking me for my passphrase now, in Firefox or in any other browser that you use. However, it's better if you can host it as a local website so that you can see the files and navigate between links and see it as basically what it would look like as a real site. there's actually a great package for Emacs called Simple HTTPD that can host your files as a website locally on your machine from within Emacs. You're actually creating a web server inside of Emacs for the purpose of testing out your website, which is pretty cool. So you can install this from the Melpa package repository. And if you don't have that set up yet, follow this link in the show notes to take you to the instructions for setting it up. Then you can use the MetaX package install command that is part of Emacs to install the Simple HTTPD package. I can show you right now, MetaX, let's see, package install, and then you can type in simple well, it's not pulled right now, but if you were to pull up the packages listing for Melpa, it would be in that list. I don't actually have it configured at the moment. So if you have used package install, you can just use a normal little simple HTTPD snippet here that just gets it installed. And then once you have that set up, you can run the command httpd serve directory. So I'm going to use MetaX for that, httpd serve directory. And it's going to ask me for the folder that I want to serve. And I'm going to go back to the projects, sites, my org site folder, and I'm going to select the public folder because this is the one that has the HTML output file. So when I select that, it's going to say in the echo area that it started the server on 0.0.0.0, which is basically the local host address at port 8080, 8080. And it tells you that it's serving that site, the public folder, basically. Now, if you have, for some other reason, you have a port 8080 already taken, you can use the HTTPD port variable to change that, but probably you won't need to do that. So this should just work out of the box. So now if I jump over to a Firefox browser, type in localhost 8080, then you can see now we have the org mode example site. This is actually the HTML output of the site we just created, and it's a little bit blinding because the background is white. But you can see that we have a table of contents here, which was not part of the original org file. We also have the headings that are all numbered. We have the author information. We have the timestamp whenever the output file was created, and also a link for validating that this file conforms to the XHTML specification, I think. All that stuff just sort of came for free as part of the default publishing system for HTML files in org mode. So the other interesting thing to note is that anytime you regenerate the site files using your build.sh script, you can go reload the file or the page in the browser as much as you want, because it's basically just reading the files directly off of your file system. So any changes you make will be immediately visible whenever you refresh the page. So that's very useful for making tweaks and trying to see how those look in practice. All right, so there's a few things about the output page we just saw that I would like to change to make the output look a little bit cleaner. And it's a lot of the stuff we just talked about before, like the section numbers and the headings, the author name and the published timestamp that gets added, and also that validate link. Those things I feel like are a little bit distracting, so let's try to get those out of there. And luckily, the publish system is actually very customizable, so I'll show you how we can disable a few of those things in the project configuration to get a better output. So what I want to do is take some lines of this configuration and go drop those into the org publish project A list configuration that we already have set up in buildsite.el. So I'm going to paste these in, and I will also delete these lines. Whoops. Okay, so we got a little bit of an issue with here. Look, I'll just copy this and copy it into the file. Sometimes whenever I have my structural editing stuff set up, it wants to give me a little bit of trouble. All right, so now we've got the new stuff pulled in here. And before I tell you what all this does, let's just regenerate the site and see what that does. So I'm gonna run build.sh one more time, and it's gonna take a little moment here to go back and rebuild this the code. You'll see that I do not restart the server. I just rebuild the site. I'm gonna go reload the page as soon as this is done, and you'll be able to see the output get pulled up on the screen. Just takes 1 second. The reason why it's a little bit slow is because I'm recording at the same time, so that takes up a lot of CPU. So now I'm gonna refresh the page with Control R in the browser, and now you can see that the heading numbering has gone away, the author has gone away, the timestamp has gone away. New thing showed up here, this Emacs 28050, basically the version line. However, validate did not go away. So let's talk about what we actually did here. So in the publishing configuration for our site, I added a few lines here that actually configure the publishing output. With author nil turns off that author line in the file. With creator, T turns on the line where it basically says what the version of Emacs you used to generate the site and also the version of org mode that was used to generate the site. So that could be kind of useful if you want people to know that you generated it with Emacs and org mode, and also include the version numbers that you're using at the time. The with table of contents, I have it set to T here, but I'm going to change it to nil in a second so you see what that does. Section numbering, I turned it off with nil. If you don't remember about T and nil in Emacs Lisp, T is true. It is basically the true or the yes value, and nil is the false value or the no value, basically. So whenever you use T, that's turning something on. When you're using nil, that's turning something off in this case. And then lastly, timestamp file is nil here as well, because we want that timestamp to not be included with the output. So now that you saw what it does, let's actually change this with TOC to nil. And then I'm going to go generate the output again, and we'll refresh the page and see if the table of contents is gone. And as you'll be able to see, you can just configure the output using a lot of these different variables, basically setting keys inside of your project A list, and make the output basically however you would like it to be. So now that the page has been regenerated, I'm going to reload the page, and the table of contents is now gone. So you can see that it was pretty easy to make that go away if you don't want table of contents in your files. I will also say that some of these things can be configured on a per file basis as well. So that maybe if you want table of contents to be turned off on most pages of your site, there is a way to turn it on for individual pages, but we'll talk about that in another video because I don't want to clog this one up with too many details. All right, so I changed that back to T now. We'll see a table of contents again the next time. So I will point out one more time that if you go to the help, if you use Control-H-V on the org publish project A list variable and go to the help descriptions, you can see that all of these things like with author, they're all described here, and you'll get more information if you go into the docs and take a look at what settings are available. So if there's other things you want to remove from your output, like let's say to-do states on the headings, you can go and just find which option turns that on or off, and then control that output with these various settings. All right, let's go back to the slides. All right, so we're gonna need to set a different variable to get rid of that validate link at the bottom of the page. So there's a different set of variables for some of the customization of the HTML formatter output. And in this case, I'm going to use the org HTML validation link variable, set that to nil so that it takes that validate link out. And then I'm going to go back and run our build.sh to generate the site one more time, and we're going to see if it makes the validate link go away. And it might take just a second for that. There's going to be a lot more of these org HTML variables that you might want to look at for customization of other things that are in the output. If you use Control-H-V, and if you have a completion system like Ivy, Helm, Vertigo, Selectron, etc. set up, you can just type in org-html and find a lot of different variables that you might be able to set to customize that further. All right, let's go take a look at the file that we just generated. I'm going to refresh it, and now the table of contents came back because I turned that setting back on, but that validate link at the bottom is now gone because I turned that setting off. So we have a lot of control over what the output does just based on the publishing settings, as well as various other variables that you can set in your configuration. All right, so I've got a list of other project settings that you might want to customize, basically the same list that you saw in that help documentation. So you might want to go take a look at all of these. First is the publish setting key that you can put in your publish configuration. And then there's also variables that you can set in your Emacs config or in your script's configuration variables, basically, to control all this stuff. There's multiple ways to set these. All right, moving on. So at this point, we have a decent basic output for our website, but what if we want to make it look a little bit nicer? So by setting a few more variables, we can actually use a nice style sheet to give our site a more polished look. So we're going to add some more variables to that set queue that we had seen before. So I'm going to jump back into the build site.el. I'm going to replace this line with this new set of lines, and then we're going to generate the site and show what it does, and then I will tell you, well, I'll tell you a little bit more about it right now. So we've kept our org HTML validation link, set that to null. We've also set org HTML head include scripts to null, which basically controls whether that initial JavaScript gets included with the output file. We don't really need that because we're going to do our own custom site template, and we're going to continue to add to that as we go on in this series. But for now, we're just going to take out the default scripts and also the default style sheet that gets added, because we basically want to make it as plain as possible so we can go back and add our own styling using CSS. And now we can use this org HTML head variable to include a link to a style sheet to automatically style our output and make it look a bit better. And I'm using this simple CSS. I don't know, but it wouldn't really be a framework. It's sort of like a CSS file that you can download from the internet. If you click this link below in the show notes, it'll take you there. It will describe more about it. But it's a very simple style sheet that will get you a nice looking page just sort of by default without having to do any work. So we're using this link rel. This is actual HTML that we're sort of pasting into the file. And then we're just linking straight to the CSS file on a CDN for simple CSS. And we can go now look and reload our page. And we'll see that the styling looks completely different now. We have different fonts. We've gone with a more sans serif font style. And our links look bigger. They have little hover actions. The text is centered more on the screen, so it's not so wide across. And this looks much more like what you would see on someone's actual blog site. So if you want a good starting point for styling your website and your org mode output, you can basically just take this simple.css file, copy it into your public folder, and then update this link to point to that instead, and then make any changes you want to the CSS file. We're gonna actually go through that in another video to show in more depth how that's supposed to work. All right, so now we've got our improved output for the website. It's starting to look pretty good. But now we don't really have much information on the site, so let's take a more real example of a page that we might want to generate a website for. And so what happens if we try to generate a more elaborate file containing something like code blocks? Let's try it out with another file. This is going to be a version of my literate configuration for Emacs called emacs.org. And I cheated a little bit. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice already. I cheated a little bit. I'm going to take this emacs.org file here and move it into the content folder. So now inside of content, we have index.org and emacs.org. So let's try to run the build script now. Build.sh. For some reason, eShell doesn't want to complete that. And we're going to let that run for a second while I take a little sip of water. And then once that's finished, we'll get to take a look at the output file for the emacs.org file. However, one thing we're going to see is a bunch of errors, or not really errors, the file will generate, but we're going to see some warnings basically that it can't fontify the source block. And this is what I was telling you before about code blocks having issues sometimes. So what it wants is a new package called htmlize.el to help with setting up HTML for code blocks so that they can be styled using CSS. So let's go take a look at the output site. And I'm going to open up the emacs.html file because the emacs.org file translates to emacs.html. And you can see we actually have a nice large file that has a lot of links to the various headings inside of the file. That happens all automatically. And then all of the different sections are here. All the code blocks are here, but the code blocks themselves are not highlighted. There's no syntax highlighting. So we can actually solve this issue by installing this HTMLize package, but we want to make sure that we install it in the context of the script so that every time we run the script, like on a remote machine or anything else, we can still install that dependency very reliably. So I'm going to take a little snippet of code here, and then I'll tell you what it does after we copy it over and then try to run it. So we're going to put this in our build site.el file. I'm going to drop it at the top of the file because we want this to be the first thing that happens. And don't worry about all the markings here. It's just fly check going a little bit crazy. So let's run build.sh and I'll explain what this does. So first of all, we are going to pull in Emacs package system so we can install an external package. And then we're going to set the package user directory, which is basically the location where Emacs packages get stored when they are installed. We're going to set it to the current folder under the .packages folder. And the reason why we do that is because we do not want our personal Emacs configuration's own packages to get pulled into our build folder. This makes it so that the packages we install for our build script on our local machine don't get mixed in with our own personal packages, because it could cause conflicts, or maybe you don't want those things showing up in your own personal config because you don't use them except for just publishing websites. We add Melpa to the package archive section, which is important because we want to install HTMLize from Melpa. Then we initialize the package system. We refresh the archive contents if necessary, because that's the only way that we can find the HTMLize package. And then we just run package install HTMLize. So this basically sets up our ability to install any dependencies we need from Elpa or Melpa, and any other packages in the future that we want to add as dependencies to this script, we can add those lines here for package install, basically. So if we look at the output, we can see that it did actually contact Melpa and Elpa, and then it went and installed this HTMLized file or package. And now we don't get those errors anymore because now we've installed the HTMLized package. And if we go look at the output for this file, we can see that now the code blocks are syntax highlighting. And there's a little bit of syntax highlighting styles inside of the simple.css library. But in a future episode of this series, I'm actually going to show you how to get full coloring using the same color theme that you use in Emacs, so that you get fully colored blocks that could look like the code that you have in your own files in Emacs, which is going to look pretty cool. But for now, we're just going to go with the simple highlighting because it does a job. I mean, you can tell that it's code, and some things are called out compared to other things like strings and function names, etc. So it works pretty well for now. All right, so what else we want to say here? Yep, that's it. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you today is how you can create links between pages on your site, because if you're going to try to create a website, you will need to create links between pages. Otherwise, you're going to have a pretty boring website, or probably it's not going to have much information on it. So let's open up our index.org site and create a link inside of it to our emacs.org file. So I'm going to go back to index.org, and I'm going to create a, I'm going to write some text here basically. So here is a link to my, and then I'm going to use the org insert link command, which is bound to Control-C, Control-L. That's in the show notes if in case you need to take a look at that. Control-C, Control-L, and it's going to ask me for the link. So I'm going to type in /emacs.org because we want to link to a file in the same folder as this file. Press enter. Then it asks me for a description. So I want to type the text for the link. So here I'm going to type Emacs configuration. And then I'm done. I have a link here, and that links to that org file. Now, whenever the publish system writes this file out, and let's check this out by just running build.sh, whenever the publish system sees this link, it's actually going to change that .org extension to .html because it knows when it writes that file out to the output folder, it needs to tweak all the links to other files in the same project so that they show up the right way in the output. So now we're going to take a look at the output whenever this thing finishes running, and we'll see that that link will work. So I'm going to go back to the index page. Whoops, let's see, localhost 8080. And now we see that here is a link to my Emacs configuration. I click on it and it goes to the Emacs configuration. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood how you can add links between pages, because it is pretty important for being able to make a website with org mode. And also, last thing I wanted to say is it will actually check to see if those files in your links exist. So if you were to go change this file in index.org, so if I put my cursor on that link, press Control-C, Control-L, it will allow me to change the link. If you look down in the echo area, the mini buffer here, I'm going to change it to emacs2.org, press enter. I'll press enter again because I don't want to change the title. I'll save this file, open up the shell again, run build.sh. And when it tries to convert index.org to an HTML file, it's actually going to show a pretty nasty looking error saying that it can't find Emacs 2. So it's good to see this because you might see errors like this, and I want to show you how to understand what's going on. So in just a moment, it should actually throw an error. If it doesn't throw an error, I'd be surprised. Okay, so maybe it didn't. Anyway, there's certain cases where whenever you have a link that doesn't show up, it will throw an error, but in this case it didn't. So that's a little bit surprising. Wait, yeah. So anyway, sorry, mea culpa. It did do that to me before, and you may see an error that looks like this: debugger entered Lisp error, unable to resolve link emacs2.org. In this case, it didn't, so who knows. But just keep in mind that sometimes it will check that the target of a link exists, and it will throw an error in that case. Just something to be aware of. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the final build script now. I've committed all the code that you saw in this video to the following GitHub repository. It's basically under the System Crafters GitHub org and the org website example repository. You can click that link in the show notes to get there. I'm also going to put a link to the exact commit for this episode because we're going to keep working in the same repository as the videos go on, and I want to make sure that you can find the code for this specific video. So there may be another little link after this to say what the commit was. So follow that specifically. And in the next video, I'm going to actually show you how you can automatically publish an org-based website to GitHub hosting services like GitHub Pages and SourceHut Pages. which is really nice because it means that if you have a Git repo full of Git files and you make a commit to it and push the commit to that service, then it will automatically regenerate the website. And this is great for blogs and also for .files repositories if you're using org mode for a literate configuration. You can generate a website based on your own config. You can check out my site like that in the show notes below, config.davidwill.com. So very cool functionality that you can do very easily, and it's all free, or at least on GitHub Pages. So we'll see how to do that later. And here's the final form of the build site.el script in case you want to just copy and paste that. And you could also just copy the stuff that I have on this repository that I mentioned before. Okay, I hope that was helpful to you. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or any comments about what we talked about today. And also, please don't forget to leave a like because it helps push this video out to other people on YouTube. So until next time, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Happy hacking. Thanks a lot.